Okay, water is here. Thank you.
Please have a seat.
Ay, qué bien.
Uau! Molt bona tarda. Hola a totes, a tots. Gràcies per haver vingut avui a acompanyar-nos i sobretot per fer costat a aquesta visita tan especial que tenim avui aquí. Saludem també... Saludem també a la gent que ens està seguint per streaming, perquè, com sabeu, ha costat fer lloc per tothom, perquè l'interès és suprem el dia d'avui, per tant, una salutació també a tothom qui ens està seguint. Abans de començar aquest espai i aquest col·loqui, llegiré un manifest. Des de les col·lectives antiracistes i anticolonials autoorganitzades, avui, en ple any 2024, som de nou feministes aixafaguitarres. I tornem a fer un assenyalament a les polítiques de la indústria cultural catalana que ja vam fer el 2020, el 2017 i com hem fet tantes altres vegades. Les lluites de la resistència del sud global i les comunitats marginalitzades de les perifèries al nord no són sabers imprescindibles per la nostra supervivència com a cossos negres i marrons i en un món que ni compta amb nosaltres, ni ens hi vol, ni tan sols espera que sobrevisquem. Esdeveniments com aquesta fira del llibre crític haurien de ser una oportunitat perquè el coneixement que emana de les nostres resistències ancestrals, des dels llibres i des de la nostra acció política, es trobi amb altres perspectives de transformació radical en aquest territori colonial. Malauradament, veiem que el món editorial i cultural encara és un territori en disputa per a les persones no blanques. I ho és per la reticència d'una indústria cultural que continua tractant com a fetitx els treballs d'Angela Davis, de Sara Ahmed o de James Baldwin, mentre evita a tota costa connectar-les amb les realitats racistes que els cossos negres i marrons ens enfrontem diàriament aquí. Mort a la frontera sud, segregació escolar, exclusió residencial, violència policial i moltes més. Angela Davis no és un producte de consum per a les vostres samarretes. Sara Ahmed no escriu cites per les vostres tasses. Elles, igual que Ansaldua, Lord, Hooks, escriuen sobre la violència que ens travessa i sobre l'esperança que ens guia a resistir en aquest món antinegre. Elles són tan feministes aixafaguitarres com ho som nosaltres. Per això, seguirem parlant, malgrat els intents de silenciar-nos, malgrat el menysteniment a les nostres veus i posicions polítiques als marges d'aquest territori, malgrat que avui estigui jo en aquesta sala i en aquest escenari de rebot, perquè un cop més hem hagut de forçar la nostra entrada i reclamar implacablement l'espai. Nosaltres, per si no ha quedat clar, estem organitzades, unides i a tot arreu. Gràcies.
Toma, cariño, quédate ahí.
Gràcies. Gràcies. Dit això, si us sembla, escoltem a l'Angela Davis, que per això hem vingut també. Començo amb la primera pregunta. It's weird to speak in Catalan to you, but the translation is going to be nice and smooth. Crec que la majoria de les persones que estem en aquesta sala, especialment les dones negres i racialitzades, coincidireu amb mi que dona, raça i classe va ser una de les primeres pedres en el nostre camí quan vam començar el nostre trajecte d'autoconsciència, d'empoderament i d'autoconeixement com a dones negres. 43 anys després de la seva publicació, com creus que han evolucionat les lluites en referència a aquests tres termes?
Well, first of all, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
And thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this wonderful fair. That's a very complicated question you're asking because I published that book in English in 1981. And that was how many years ago?
43.
45 years ago. Wow. So there's a lot of water that has run under the bridge since then. And today there are more interesting, more complicated, more urgent analyses, I think. I was attempting to try to understand how it might be possible to address not only gender, but also race and class, recognizing that the tradition of Black feminism that existed at that time was one that called for attention to all three of those terms simultaneously. Now there are more terms. Now we have notions like intersectionality, coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, of course. And let me say that I think it's very important that we use those concepts and those notions. At the same time, I think that we were really attempting to argue that we needed to think things together that were offered to us separately. And academics often treat concepts myopically. Sometimes that's necessary if you're going to do the analysis. But what you can't forget is that in the real world, in the social world, the concepts cease to be concepts and they're about messy realities. And I think that that effort to try to figure out how we might think things together that are ordinarily thought apart had been going on for a very long time before the term intersectionality was coined. And sometimes we get stuck on a term. We think that the struggle is about the term. And that struggle continues. We continue to try to approximate what we experience in social reality through the concepts and terms we developed. So I think we should say the struggle continues. And of course, any social struggle is a struggle that is a constant struggle. It continues and continues. But thank you for the comments regarding women, race, and class.
Now my turn. Okay, I'm going to speak in Spanish.
Okay. You have to remind me that
Yeah,
I need to put... this is...
Just put close to you. It's enough.
Yeah.
Como acabas de decir, para ti es de suma importancia relacionar todas las luchas sociales. Sueles decir que es imprescindible explicarle a la gente de Ferguson, donde asesinaron a Michael Brown, o a la gente de Minneapolis, donde George Floyd fue asesinado, explicarles que lo que está sucediendo en Palestina también les afecta, que las vidas palestinas también son dominadas por un sistema de prisiones que es parte del complejo industrial capitalista. Sueles poner el ejemplo del G4S, la tercera corporación privada más grande del mundo. Dices que el G4S es responsable no solo del encarcelamiento político de los palestinos, sino también del muro del apartheid, del encarcelamiento en Sudáfrica, las escuelas tipo prisión de Estados Unidos o de los centros de agresión sexual en Gran Bretaña. ¿Entender estos vínculos sería para ti la interseccionalidad?
Yeah, I think that's an important usage of the notion of intersectionality, recognizing the interrelationality of our struggles. And this is a moment when finally, at least in the United States, solidarity with Palestine is a part of all social justice agendas. And I think it's important to remember that these struggles around Palestine have been going on since 1948, since 1967. And because of the power of Zionist ideology, because of the power of capitalism, because Israel is the outpost for capitalism in that part of the world. Let's not forget that. And let's not forget why the United States is and remains, even today, Israel's closest ally. So many people have been involved all over the world, of course, in struggles for solidarity with Palestine for many, many decades. And I can remember perhaps in around 2010 or so, there was increasing discussion in social justice movement circles about how to guarantee that Palestine might become an important element of broader social justice agendas. Because before, it was the feminist movement, the anti-racist movement, even the environmental movement. All of these movements were considered a part of the social justice movement agendas, and then Palestine was over here by itself. And so what is so important now is that finally, after 40, 50 years, ever larger numbers of people are recognizing how important Palestine is, not only with respect to the struggle for freedom for Palestine, but also for all of our social justice struggles. If we cannot manage to build the kind of solidarity movement that will be effective in the process of forging a new world for Palestinians, then how can we deal with the issues that we face at home? How can we go further in the struggle against racism? How can we abolish prisons? How can we abolish the police? So, yeah, I think it actually is a very good usage of that term.
All lives matter, not all men. I'm going to speak in Spanish.
Oh, thank you.
Todas las vidas importan, no todos los hombres. Estos son eslóganes de la reacción neofascista o ultraderechista, All lives matter, not all men, ¿okay? Eslóganes de esa reacción ultraderechista que estamos viviendo. Aquí en Cataluña, cuando empezó el proceso independentista, se decía desde España que los independentistas habían despertado al fascismo. Ahora nos dicen que la reacción patriarcal y racista es culpa de las feministas, las migrantes. Según las encuestas, esta reacción tiene que ver con la pérdida de legitimidad de la democracia liberal porque no es capaz de frenar la expansión de la pobreza que el capitalismo produce. Pero no todo el mundo se vuelve fascista al empobrecerse. ¿Qué características y causas tiene para ti esta reacción general y en concreto en Estados Unidos? Y de paso, ¿qué opinas sobre lo que dicen ciertos medios de la posibilidad de una guerra civil si gana o pierde Trump? Las elecciones, que son en noviembre.
Ooh. Well, first of all, we should recognize by now that the forces arrayed against us are powerful. And we should also recognize that if we win even the slightest victory, they're going to try to overturn that victory. So, in a sense, it's a measure of the power of struggles that have been unfolding against capitalism, against racial capitalism, against colonialism, against heteropatriarchy. We didn't think that they were going to just open the doors, open the gates, and welcome us, did we?
No.
One of the problems that we often confront is that we think that we engage in one struggle, in a struggle once, and then we win the victory, and the victory is etched in stone. But we know that we constantly have to be vigilant. We have to defend the victory. We have to, as Sarah Ahmed was pointing out in the amazing conversation that took place on this stage before lunch, that oftentimes we have to repeat ourselves. We have to repeat our struggles. Because if we don't, whatever we have won will be snatched away from us. And I think that explains the rise of the fascist and ultra-right all over the country. It is not so much that they arose out of nowhere in response to what many of us have been trying to do for decades. They have always been there. And it is, the point that I'm trying to make is that we often fail to recognize that their comments and their interventions and their actions are actually a measure of our power. They are responding to the fact that progressive and radical forces are on the right side of history. And they want to turn history backwards. So whenever we develop strategies for change, we always have to remember that that struggle is not going to unfold within an abstract environment. It is always a struggle against those who want to move backwards in history, the counter-revolutionaries, the conservatives. The very meaning of conservative is to conserve things as they are, to prevent them from changing. So they're doing what they were meant to do. it is our responsibility to develop more power and more appeal and more movements and more people than they. And you can ask me about Trump later. I mean, actually, I'm sorry. I'm not even supposed to pronounce his name in public. You can ask me about he who shall not be named for the rest of this conversation later.
Molt bé. La meva següent pregunta va molt en la línia... Perdona. Deia que la meva següent pregunta va molt en la línia del que estaves dient d'aquesta mena d'efecte boomerang, que cada vegada que nosaltres fem un pas endavant hi ha 20 passos més preparats per empènyer-nos cap enrere. Precisament el que volia explicar és que les teves teories són un manual de supervivència per nosaltres, les persones negres, les persones marrons, per les so-called minories. També aquí, a Espanya, i també aquí, a Catalunya, els nostres drets segueixen sent sistemàticament vulnerats. Estem parlant de, des de l'any 2014, les xifres recullen, que no són exactes, segur que n'hi ha moltes més, però hi ha hagut més de 29.600 morts de persones que han intentat creuar el Mediterrani per arribar a costes europees. I aquest només és un exemple. Hi ha existències de centres d'internament d'estrangers on es tanca les persones simplement per no tenir papers, són presons per al fet de no tenir papers, i moltes més. De fet, en el manifest ho deien, violència policial, segregació escolar, etc. Però, simultàniament a tot això, estem vivint una era que estan passant unes coses que en podríem dir excepcionals. Per exemple, a les darreres eleccions municipals vam tenir la primera candidata a alcaldia de Barcelona negra. No havia passat mai. Un altre cas, per primera vegada hem tingut una dona negra dirigint una institució cultural tan gran com és el MACBA, que és el Museu d'Art Contemporani de Catalunya. Això no havia passat mai, tampoc. I en el meu cas mateix, jo treballo a la televisió pública catalana, ha existit durant 40 anys, en cap moment s'havien plantejat que potser faltava diversitat allà, i després de 40 anys de funcionament de televisió pública he estat la primera periodista negra que ha treballat allà. Per tant, les germanes, the sisters there. Gràcies, gràcies. Per tant, la meva pregunta és la següent. Com és possible que coexisteixin aquestes realitats? És a dir, per una banda, augment del feixisme, també en el context europeu podem parlar de cada vegada més militarització, ús de tecnologia en els cossos policials i dotar-los de més recursos precisament per poder exercir aquesta violència racista i colonial, i simultàniament aquestes espurnes de bones notícies. Com és possible que coexisteixin aquestes dues realitats?
Well, the last time I was here in Barcelona, when was it? 4 years ago or so?
Yeah, in 2020. Yeah.
I remember making the point that Europe still imagines itself as white. Despite the fact that vast numbers of people of African, Asian, Latin American descent live here in Europe. Now, I also remember when I was speaking at the Cultural Center, there was a Black woman who asked a question, who pointed out that Catalan was her first language. However, she was always viewed as a foreigner. And I guess we should celebrate the fact that you're the first Black woman on Catalan television.
Thank you. Thank you.
But we should also beware of firsts.
Yes.
And we should recognize that we can't be satisfied with the first or the second or the third or the fourth. So this is where we learn that victories rarely achieve what we want as single victories. And we tend to, I mean, of course, I'm so happy that,
Thank you so much.
that you're on Catalan television, but we tend to celebrate the first, when the first really should be an invitation to struggle for more.
Yes.
And I mean, I love the slogan that early Black feminist organizers took on, and that was lifting as we climb. So refuse to be the first, refuse to be the only, and continue to struggle in order to open the door for ever larger numbers of people. And then there's the question of transformation. Being the first often indicates that the structures remain the same. So the real question is, how do we transform the structures that made it possible I mean, I don't want to beat up on Catalan television, but since this is the example, that it was possible for so many years, even after significant numbers of Black people settled here. But I think it's a constant struggle. It's an ongoing struggle.
Definitivament. Parlem ara de... Translation. Sorry. Això de les llengües. Ara. Parlem també d'un tema que ja ha anat sortint, que és la violència policial, que s'exerceix arreu del món sobre els cossos no blancs. Segons l'últim informe de SOS Racisme a Catalunya, indica que es fan 8 vegades més detencions de persones fenotípicament llegides com a estrangeres, no blanques, que no pas de persones blanques. I això és una petita xifra que il·lustra el dia a dia que han d'afrontar les persones racialitzades. Tu has treballat molt en els sistemes penitenciaris i en com estan dissenyats per exterminar a les comunitats minoritzades i de com cal treballar i seguir lluitant per abolir-los. Llavors, una mica recuperant el que jo ja he dit abans, que parlava dels cossos policials cada vegada més ben dotats amb més recursos, amb intel·ligència artificial, amb tècniques de reconeixement facial, amb tota mena amb la tecnologia treballant a favor seu per poder exercir més repressió, tenint aquest panorama, quina ha de ser la manera d'articular els moviments socials, els moviments de resistència social contra la violència policial?
Ooh. Well, that's a big question. And we know that even as we sometimes appear to win victories over the police, they always come back, and they always come back with a rage. As a matter of fact, if we consider the movement that came to ahead in the summer of 2020, the movement against racism. Terms began to appear in public discourse like abolition, like defund the police. And for a while, it looked as if they were going to acquire a kind of counter-hegemonic status that really had some power. But the police have returned with a rage. And so now we see Cop City in Atlanta, Georgia, which is an attempt to create training grounds for police, a larger one than ever before in the history of our country. The police are really going on an offensive. They're not only trying to create new structures, such as Cop City, which incidentally was cited in an area of Atlanta, Georgia, that had been promised the adjacent communities that are poor and black, that would be green space for them. So instead of parks, instead of hiking areas, now it is destined to become a vast police training ground. There's so many other examples of the ways in which the police are now attempting to regain the offensive. And I think it's important to point out that the detention facilities you were referring to, the use of police for immigrants, the use of detention facilities, that is very much connected to the abolitionist movement. It's not only abolition of prisons and jails, not only abolition of police, but abolition of all of the facilities that have been generated in connection with the attack on migrants all over the world. And as a matter of fact, that movement is connected with many other movements. Abolition is not just myopically focused on a couple of institutions, but it is also focused on the so-called child welfare structure and immigrant police and facilities that are used against immigrants in ever larger numbers of institutions of social control. There's a lot of work to be done. And this is, again, a situation in which we can use the term intersectionality. The intersectionality of the institutions demand an intersectionality of the struggles.
Drink. Don't worry, we have time. And after, because I'm going to ask you in Spanish, so don't worry. Os pido un poco de paciencia, porque voy a alargarme un poquito, ahora, poquito, para introducir el debate del que quiero que nos hable. Hemos titulado esta entrevista The Fight That Never Ends, la lucha que nunca termina. Gracias. Porque creemos contigo que la emancipación es una constante lucha. Pero la lucha implica conflicto, y el conflicto, resistencia, violencia y coacción. En primero de carrera, les pongo a mis estudiantes ese vídeo histórico en el que te preguntan sobre la violencia, intentando que condenes las protestas callejeras que en su momento se estaban dando cuando te hicieron la entrevista. Y tú respondes al entrevistador que qué violencia. Habréis visto el vídeo, es histórico. ¿Qué violencia? ¿La del Ku Klux Klan, la de la policía, la de las prisiones o la de las instituciones que legitiman la desposesión de las personas afroamericanas. Haces ver que hay violencias diferentes. En cambio, dentro del amplio debate sobre violencia y antipunitivismo, hay una corriente muy extendida en la izquierda, allí y aquí, que entiende el antipunitivismo desde un marco filosófico que condena toda violencia, todo castigo y toda coacción como mala per se. Y cree que es posible gobernar, crear comunidades políticas, sin coacción y sin ningún tipo de violencia, solo mediante el diálogo habermasiano de la democracia deliberativa. Y es todo muy curioso porque Habermas está estos días defendiendo a Israel, mientras sostiene, junto con esa parte de la izquierda, esa idea de que quienes usan la violencia son primitivos o terroristas, como hemos sido las vascas hasta ayer, o como son hoy, ayer y siempre los palestinos. Sobre este marco filosófico han discutido también estas últimas semanas Judith Butler y Jodi Dean, a la cual, por cierto, han despedido por su postura pro-palestina. Yo opino que los mandamientos de no matarás, no castigarás ni usarás la violencia son pura y llanamente violencia. Sobre todo porque este discurso es enunciado por cuerpos que pueden sobrevivir sin ejercer la violencia directa, porque tienen toda una estructura de violencia indirecta normalizada que sostiene su privilegiada posición. Pregunta. ¿Crees que la deliberación habermasiana es el camino para terminar con la explotación, los ricos y las corporaciones? ¿O crees que la izquierda necesita plantear seriamente qué tipos de coacciones y violencias requiere un proceso de emancipación?
You've covered, so much ground. Well, first of all, I think we all know that those who get accused of using violence as a weapon are generally the ones who are struggling for a better world for everyone. Those who are, and this is actually, I think, the point that I made 50 years ago in that interview when I was in my 20s, and the journalist was asking me about violence, and it was the first interview I had done since I had been arrested. I was in jail at the time. I was incarcerated in a violent institution. And so he asked me what I thought about the use of violence by movements that were struggling for social change. And I was very angry then. So I can't remember exactly what I said, but I do know that I mentioned the violence that I grew up with in Birmingham, Alabama, which was the violence of Ku Klux Klan's people bombing churches and synagogues and homes and killing people. But having said that, I should also point out that I grew up with, in a family and in a community that detested violence because they had seen so much violence. But it was also a community that was not afraid to fight back. And my father had weapons in the house. And sometimes we would see him pull a gun out of the drawer that we were not allowed to look into when there were threats against the neighborhood, because bombings took place in that community. White, right-wing Ku Klux Klan types were always bombing homes in that community. And so there were also teams of people. In those days, it was the men in the community drove around every night as a patrol, as an armed patrol, because that was the only way to defend the community. So all of which is to say, I could do an entire narrative about the importance of self-defense, particularly when we're struggling to overturn those institutionalized forms of violence that are recognized as utterly normal. So all of which is to say, I said it was a complicated, and we could have conversations about the role of violence. So, we could look at Fanon, for example, and the way in which he describes violence in Les Damnés de la Terre. But I don't know whether we should focus so myopically on violence, because it's not really about violence. It's about the capacity to win struggles and defend one's victories. And sometimes violence is necessary. And, of course, Habermas has this idealized world, this notion of an idealized world in which discourse is completely free of all kinds of causal forces. But we don't live in that world. We live in the real world. And as much as I think that violence has a terrible impact on those who are its targets, but also those who wield the violence. As much as I would believe that, I still insist that we have the right to defend our struggles and defend our victories. Now, this doesn't mean that we should all go out and grab guns, and because it's no longer a matter of that. It's a question of nuclear weapons. As a matter of fact, let me bring here the example of Israel and the ways in which the Palestinian violence, that oftentimes consists of throwing rocks, is represented as violence, whereas the violence of nuclear weapons and the government in that region, which is more militarized than any other government. So let's also develop the capacity to think. And I would say this to Professor Habermas, who was my professor at one point. But I also remember that he was not opposed to calling the police on students. In 1967, when there were student movements in Frankfurt and in Berlin. So, yeah.
Yes, take again.
But you understand what I'm talking about,
yes.
right?
We do.
But our primary defense is never violence that is wielded without reflection. We know that the way we defend our movements is to bring ever larger numbers of people into the ranks of those movements. That is our major form of defense. But if there are those who insist, we stand up and fight.
Vale. En el libro, La libertad es una lucha continua, dices así, abro cita. Tenemos que aprender a pensar, actuar y luchar contra aquello que está ideológicamente constituido como normal. Y podemos preguntarnos en ese contexto por qué las mujeres trans, y especialmente las mujeres trans negras que no pueden pasar fácilmente, se las considera tan fuera de la norma. El feminismo nos ha ayudado a desarrollar estrategias epistemológicas y organizativas que nos llevan más allá de las categorías de mujer y género. Pero todavía nos enfrentamos al desafío de comprender las complejas formas en que se entrelazan la raza, la clase, el género, la sexualidad, la nación y la capacidad. Y también nos enfrentamos a cómo ir más allá de estas categorías para comprender las interrelaciones de ideas y procesos que parecen estar separados, como hemos dicho antes, insistir en las conexiones entre luchas y racismo en Estados Unidos y luchas contra la represión israelí de los palestinos. En este sentido, es un proceso feminista. Cierro cita. ¿Por qué es eso un proceso feminista?
Okay. So what was that term we were talking about earlier?
Which one?
The one you raised? What is the term that's most frequently associated with feminism these days?
Intersectionality?
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Intersectionality. And, I mean, of course, there are feminists and people associated with feminism, some feminist movements that insist that feminism is about penetrating the glass ceiling. But of course, you know, those are the women who've made it so far that they're just on the other side of the pinnacle of the pyramid, or whatever you want to call the structure. All they have to do is break the ceiling, and they've made it. You know, I always like to point out that my friend Michael Bennett, who's a former football player with the Seattle Seahawks, likes to point out that he's not really that concerned about those who are already at the top. He's concerned about those who are underneath the floor. And so how do we develop a feminism whose primary concern is with those who have least felt the reach of freedom. So, having said that, I would say that feminism, the kind of feminism that I embrace, is never abstract feminism. It's not freedom for an abstract woman. And as a matter of fact, feminism isn't always about gender, which we assume. For some reason, we assume that feminism, if we use the methodology of feminism, that it is about understanding gender more deeply. But I think, feminism, especially the feminism that emanated from struggles engaged in by women of color, and those who embrace decolonial feminism, those who embrace anti-capitalist, anti-racist feminism, that's always been about a better world for everyone. It's always arrayed against the forces that want to push us backwards in history. So I would say that feminism can be powerful, and it's not confined to one or two or three or four genders. It's an invitation to think more capaciously. It's an invitation to explore those things which we have not thought together. It's an invitation to articulate those concepts. It's also an invitation to disarticulate and pull things apart. So I would say the most, feminism at its most effective, according to the way I view it, is a methodology. It's a way of thinking. It's a strategy for organizing. It's a vision for a world that has been radically transformed, not only for humans, but for our non-human co-inhabitants of this earth as well.
Bé, ens queda poc temps. There's not much time left. Per tant, faré una última pregunta, però és una pregunta trampa, perquè n'hi van dues. Però són molt senzilles i són molt curtes. Per una banda, crec que parlo en nom de totes les persones que estem implicades en algun tipus de lluita social per aconseguir més drets i una vida més igualitària per a totes nosaltres. Estem d'acord amb el fet que moltes vegades és dolorós. Cansa posar el cos, posar l'ànima, posar les ganes i rebre una onada de violència, de crítiques, de notar que ets incòmode, de sempre ser la que ha de criticar, com en el nostre cas per poder estar aquí presents avui en aquesta fira. Per tant, la pregunta és com ho has fet durant tant de temps? Quin és el secret? I perdona, l'altra pregunta molt breu que volia fer per tancar també és que si dius que sí, jo crec que serem les persones més felices d'aquest món perquè ets l'única persona de qui ens creurem si ve de tu, si dius que sí. I hi ha esperança per les nostres lluites?
Well, I have to follow Miriam Makaba on the question of hope. And she argues that hope is not so much an emotion that is produced by what is perhaps possible to achieve in the world, but rather it is a discipline. And I love this idea of hope as a discipline because it helps us to understand that an essential element of our radical and revolutionary struggles must consist of the forging of hope. Because otherwise it makes no sense to engage in these struggles against racism and heteropatriarchy and capitalism. So as someone who's, as you pointed out, been around a very long time, I've experienced periods of hopelessness, but I've come to recognize that it's part of my job to help to generate hope, and movements must take on the task very explicitly of helping to create hope, and hope that can be passed on to the next generation and the next. And I can tell you that I never expected that I would actually experience some of the developments that I've had the good fortune to actually experience. Because many of us have long grown accustomed to assuming that the work that we do is not based on the fact that we will ever experience the fruits of our labor in our own lifetime. We imagine that what we do today will resonate decades and perhaps also hundreds of years later. But with the transformations that have occurred in the field of technology with respect to communication, it feels as if historical time has been sped up. Because I know certainly when we witness the largest demonstrations ever supporting anti-racist causes in the summer of 2020, I never in my wildest imaginations could have foreseen that more white people would be in the streets demonstrating against racism in the year 2020 than ever before. And I say this, I emphasize this particular historical moment because historical memory is essential to the work that we're doing. And while under the influence of capitalist temporalities, we tend to assume that what happened, happened, and it's gone. It's a part of history. And history, of course, is something that you read in the books. It's not a force that lives with us and within us and haunts us and drives us. I think all of which is to say that that we should all be attempting to generate hope and to think in more capacious ways and embrace more capacious temporalities. Imagine the work that you're doing affecting someone many, many decades after you may no longer have a physical form on this earth. But this is the way we remain alive. This is the way we can guarantee that our spirits will survive us, and the ongoing work for liberation will continue. This is something, as someone who has reached the age of 80, and I never imagined myself as an 80-year-old. But it's actually wonderful to be able to see that the work that you participated in has actually helped to generate. And we started with Palestine, and I think we should end with Palestine. And I just actually wrote a piece. Kianga Yamata Taylor is in the house, in the front row, and she is the co-editor of a new journal called Hammer and Hope. And so she asked me to write about my own history in relation to the movement for solidarity with Palestine. And at first I said, oh my God, how can I, this is so much. How can I distill this? But it helped me to remember and to go back to my years as an undergraduate and trace my involvement through my time in Europe. I was in Europe in 1967, which was the confluence of a number of struggles, including the police killing of a German student, Benno Ohnesorge, in Berlin in 1967. So I had the opportunity to reflect on how all of these issues actually unfolded together, even though we did not have the capacity at that time to think deeply about the interrelationality of those struggles. And as a Palestine solidarity activist, we got so used to being alone, so accustomed to always getting the questions about anti-Semitism, and so to imagine the call for Palestinian freedom as one that would reverberate all over the world and that would encourage students to create amazing encampments and to stand up and say, no matter what you do to us, no matter how many times you arrest us, we will be here, and we call for the freedom of the Palestinian people. And having actually experienced that, it made me recognize why my very close friend, June Jordan, the black feminist poet, said many times, she was a real pioneer in terms of encouraging black people to join the solidarity, the struggle for solidarity with Palestine. Why she said that Palestine is a moral litmus test. And I remember her saying it many times and having conversations with her about it, but I never thought I would actually experience the moment when it had become clear for, I would say, the majority of people in the world that Palestine must be free. So did I answer your first question as well?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much.
And this is why we stay in the struggle. I mean, my hero is my friend and former lawyer's mother, whose name is Dorothy Burnham. My friend's name is Margaret Burnham. And she is now 109 years old.
Wow.
She was my mother's best friend. She was the one who led my my mother into radical activism. She was a longtime member of the Communist Party and actually had left the Communist Party and rejoined after he who shall not be mentioned. But anyway, yeah, it's really about generating the kind of hope that can be passed down from generation to generation. And I think that the value of growing old resides in the capacity to actually witness that and to recognize that our role as older people, because of course it's the young people who are in the forefront of the young people are always leading the struggle. This is why I take my leadership from young activists today. But those of us who are older not only are experiencing these new moments for ourselves, but we're also witnessing for those who are no longer here. And the majority of people who dedicated their lives to movements in my time are no longer with us on this earth. So I'm here as a witness of the work that they did to bring us to this moment. And it is your job to take us soaring into the future.
Bé, doncs, fins aquí aquest espai tan... Do you want to use the translator? Yeah. There you go. Palestine will be free. Free Palestine. Israel. Fins aquí aquest espai tan bonic que hem tingut. Gràcies, Angela Davis. És absolutament un somni i un honor tenir-te aquí. I per mi és el dia més feliç de la meva vida, ho dic genuïnament. Gràcies a tothom que heu vingut. Gràcies, Jule Goikoetxea. Gràcies a tothom que ha vingut amb nosaltres. Angela Davis.